At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.
While we get ready for season 22 of 5-Minute Biographies, join us for a 10-part special. Over 10 working days, we will present 10 biographies of fictional characters, but presented as if those characters were real, just for fun. I hope you enjoy them. This is episode 5, Don Quixote. In an age when the world was turning from faith to reason, from chivalry to commerce, there lived in central Spain a man who refused to surrender to the march of time. His name was Don Quixote de la Mancha, soldier, dreamer, and self-proclaimed knight-errant. Though history remembers him with both admiration and amusement, he stands today as a symbol of idealism in a world that has forgotten how to dream. Don Quixote was born in the region of La Mancha around the middle of the 16th century, into a family of modest country nobility. The world of his youth was one of dusty plains, olive groves, and fading grandeur. Spain, once the spearhead of empire, was beginning to show the strain of endless wars and religious rigidity. For a rural hidalgo, a gentleman of small estate but proud lineage, life was defined by honour, faith, and the maintenance of appearances. Little is recorded of his early years, but accounts agree that he was a man of learning and contemplation. He read widely in the histories of the Reconquista and the romances of knightly adventure that had long since fallen out of fashion. While his peers pursued wealth and influence, Don Quixote turned his thoughts to virtue, courage, and the defence of the helpless. As the modern world crept across Europe, bringing with it trade, science, and cynicism, he remained devoted to the older order of ideals, service, honour, and the belief that one righteous act could redeem the world. It was in his middle years that Don Quixote resolved to live according to the principles he admired. Convinced that chivalry was not a relic, but a remedy for his country's ills, he dusted off the armour of his ancestors and declared himself a knight-errant. His family and neighbours considered the decision a harmless eccentricity. He saw it as a sacred vow. He took up the name Don Quixote de la Mancha after his homeland and pledged to defend the innocent, right the world's wrongs, and serve his chosen lady, Dulcinea del Toboso, a peasant woman he regarded through the lens of poetic idealism. His first forays into knighthood were marked by both courage and calamity. With a borrowed horse he named Rocinante and a loyal farmer, Sancho Panza, as his squire, he set out across Castile in search of adventure. The land he found was not one of gallant knights and maidens, but of inns, windmills, and weary travellers, yet he treated each encounter as if it belonged to an epic. The bond between Don Quixote and Sancho Panza remains one of the most remarkable partnerships in recorded history. Sancho, a simple man with a sharp wit and a bottomless appetite, followed his master out of loyalty, curiosity, and the promise of a future governorship. Their companionship became the heart of Quixote's long journey, reason and faith walking side by side. Sancho's practicality grounded his master's idealism, yet even he found himself drawn into the older man's vision of a nobler world. When Quixote mistook windmills for giants, Sancho laughed. When Quixote rose bloodied but unbowed from defeat, Sancho began to believe that perhaps his master's madness contained its own truth. Through hardships and humiliation, they travelled together across the plains of Spain, confronting innkeepers, soldiers, and shepherds with the same mixture of bravery and delusion. To some, Don Quixote was a fool. To others, he was a saint. To Sancho, he was simply a man determined to live as the world ought to be, not as it was. Don Quixote's encounters were both comic and tragic. He defended prisoners he mistook for oppressed peasants, attempted to reconcile lovers, and lectured brigands on the virtues of mercy. Wherever he went, he spoke of justice, honour, and the sacred duties of knighthood, ideas that made little sense to the merchants and farmers of a weary Spain. Yet beneath the laughter, his actions carried a strange dignity. He believed that courage was not measured by success but by persistence, that failure in a noble cause was better than victory in a base one. When others mocked him, he answered with courtesy. When beaten, he forgave. His wounds, he said, were the price of faith in a cynical age. After years of wandering, Don Quixote returned to his home in La Mancha, older, battered, and briefly cured of his illusions. Friends and family rejoiced, believing he had finally abandoned his impossible dreams. For a time, he rested, speaking quietly of the need for reason and moderation. But reason alone could not sustain him. Though his mind cleared, his spirit dimmed. The world he had sought to change remained indifferent. On his deathbed, he made peace with those who had loved him and asked forgiveness of those he had offended. His final words, according to witnesses, expressed gratitude for friendship, faith, and the chance to have lived for something greater than himself. He died as he had lived, believing that goodness, however impractical, was still worth the effort. Modern historians and philosophers have long debated whether Don Quixote was mad or merely misunderstood. Some describe him as a casualty of idealism, a man broken by the disillusionment of a changing world. Others see him as a visionary who recognized that civilization without virtue is a kind of madness itself. His insistence that chivalry could still matter in an age of greed and cynicism made him both an object of ridicule and a mirror for humanity's longing to believe in something better. His so-called madness forced his contemporaries to question their own sanity, their acceptance of injustice, their complacency in cruelty, and their surrender to despair. In his failure, Don Quixote achieved what no conqueror could. He reminded the world that imagination is the soul's rebellion against apathy. Don Quixote's influence endured long after his death. His journeys inspired countless others to reflect on the tension between idealism and realism, between dreams and duty. Artists, philosophers, and reformers across Europe cited his life as proof that conviction could outlast ridicule. In Spain, he came to symbolize the nation's conscience, noble, wounded, and unyielding. Statues and poems celebrated him as the last true knight, a figure who defended the dignity of the human spirit when reason alone was not enough. He also left behind a legacy of compassion. Though mocked and misunderstood, he treated all people with respect, from peasants to princes. His kindness toward the powerless and his respect for women marked him as a man ahead of his time. To understand Don Quixote is to understand the era that made him. The late Renaissance was an age of contradictions, faith challenged by science, empire undermined by bureaucracy, and art shadowed by doubt. Spain's grandeur had begun to fade, but its pride remained. In this setting, a solitary man who refused to accept disillusionment became both a product and a critic of his age. He was not merely fighting imaginary giants, he was resisting the erosion of meaning itself. His belief in honor was not nostalgia, but protest, a refusal to live in a world that measured value by profit and power alone. Don Quixote de la Mancha remains one of history's most paradoxical figures, a man both foolish and wise, deluded and enlightened, broken and yet whole. His story endures because it touches something unchanging, the human need to believe that courage, kindness, and imagination can still redeem the world. He may have tilted at windmills, but in doing so, he taught us to see giants where others saw machinery, and ideals where others saw only futility. His life reminds us that sometimes the noblest battles are those that cannot be won, and that even in failure, the pursuit of goodness ennobles the heart. He died a relic of another age, and yet centuries later, his spirit feels oddly modern. For as long as the world mocks idealism, there will always be a need for another Don Quixote, a dreamer, a believer, and the eternal night of La Mancha. Thanks for listening to the 5-Minute Biographies podcast from 5minutebiographies.com. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, or if you would like to support us more directly, why not consider buying us a coffee? Head on over to 5minutebiographies.com/coffee to see how. Also, why not check out our other 5-minute podcasts, which you can find at 5minuteproductions.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.